Today we have on the show the creator of Obsidian's most popular plugin. And the last time I looked, I think it had something like 30,000 downloads, just absolutely ridiculous. And the module that I'm talking about, of course, is the calendar plugin, and the creator is Liam Cain. It's great to have you on the program, Liam.
Thanks for having me, Anthony.
For sure. There's so much that I want to walk through with you today, including some tips for building plugins and getting into, all of your stuff. But before we get into that, what led to the idea of the calendar plugin? And actually, I suppose before we even get there, how did you even cross paths with Obsidian? How did you find Obsidian in the first place, and how do you use Obsidian in general? And then kind of what led up to the whole calendar thing?
Yeah. So I'd say that my journey to get to Obsidian, for people that have watched the episode with Gordon, it'll sound fairly similar to his journey. But for me, like, Obsidian was the sort of end result of a long journey to try and find the perfect note-taking app. I use Obsidian primarily for just general note-taking, whether they're personal notes, work notes, and then just finally just like daily journaling, just capturing memories, thoughts, just ideas that I want to keep track of, but also link to other ideas and kind of just capture a moment in time as best I can. And I found myself starting to use Obsidian maybe July of 2020. And
wow, so only about like 9 months or 8 months, something like that.
Yeah, it's long amount of time and a super short amount of time for sure.
For building the plugin and being so integral in the community and how much you help people with the plugins, I had just assumed you've been using it a lot longer. That's cool. That's really impressive.
Thanks. I feel like even when I started, Obsidian was definitely still in its infancy. It still is obviously very young, but I'm just amazed at how mature, especially like the API has gotten in just the last few months. It's clear like that was definitely the original intent of the software, and it just feels so integral throughout that there's just a lot of planning and forethought that makes it really fun to be a part of the community.
It is. It's a great, and you would know this much better than I would being in the details, but it's a great architecture, as you said, well thought out, well structured, well architected, and just a quality enterprise class, if you will, product.
Yeah. So when I actually started using Obsidian, I think I kind of already knew I liked the software even before the API was public. And it was more just like a fun, when I sort of started getting more active in the community and then discovered there for a little while, there was Volcano, which was a plugin loader that would basically just inject a script allowing you to run local files as plugins. And while it was like a hack at the time, you kind of already got to tap in like at day one into what very quickly evolved into the plugin API. And it was already, even at that level, it was already felt like, okay, a mature API that was the version 1 of the calendar plugin was made using Volcano. And I had to make like only a few changes between that and the official plugin architecture. So it's amazing how just sort of mature everything sort of started out, and obviously it's continued to improve quite a bit, but both Obsidian and the calendar. But it's been a fun journey.
So how did you come to it? So like before Obsidian, what was your kind of your note-taking journey, if you will, that led to where you were this past summer?
Yeah. So we were chatting before this for a little bit, but I'd say it's obviously there's a lot of stops along the way, but the the main sort of contenders for note taking. There was sort of the simplicity of like plain text notes for a while. So notational velocity, and other like eventually like NV alt, and sort of all of the offshoots of that. And then it sort of transitioned to me using for a while Bear, which is just a beautiful piece of software. I sort of fell in love with Bear, just got kind of locked into the ecosystem and sort of never looked back for a while. So I had maybe 4 to 5 years worth of notes in Bear before this. And then when I sort of was looking for sort of a little bit of a change, like this past year, or so I guess in early 2020, I sort of tried out that's when I first sort of heard like even the term Zettelkasten, learned that there's just a wealth of apps out there that I had to try and fiddle with, and figured out all the things I liked and didn't like. Yep. And so finally eventually landed on Obsidian, but it was pretty eye-opening to actually play with all of those different pieces of software, because they all kind of, not only did they get to learn from one another, but I kind of got to learn what I liked about each of those things.
Were you linking notes in Bear, or were you using it primarily as kind of independent note repository?
So I was very loosely linking notes in Bear, but I felt like without like any like graph view or any sort of architectural, like there wasn't, it still felt like a black box. Like I could jump from one note to another.
Totally.
But then I was lost. Yeah. So that's sort of where I think that was the primary reason that I was kind of just sort of frustrated with those notes in general. And I felt like as long as I was keeping everything like properly organized in Bear, it worked, but it didn't work any other way.
So when you went to Obsidian, did you migrate, kind of pull all your notes in, or did you only select certain notes, or did you start from a clean slate in Obsidian?
So I was able to pretty easily migrate all my Bear notes, and then a lot of other notes like kind of trickled in along the way, where I kind of was like, oh, I forgot I was using org Roam. Oh, I'll try and pull in all those notes, and some of them didn't necessarily fit with my vault, but tried my best.
Okay, so you got into Obsidian. Would love to see kind of like how you structure, your notes, right? So you're a developer, but you also, not only develop plugins for Obsidian, but you obviously use it, as you said, for your own, for personal, for work, for journaling. Would love to kind of peek at your structure and how you use it, and then what led to, where did the idea for the calendar, kind of come from? Were you using it and thinking, I really wish so.
Yeah. So for the, like, where the calendar came from, that was actually, there's like a long thread in the Obsidian forums now. And I think the original inception of the thread was someone created a script where it's like, okay, here's the whole year of 2020, no more, no less. This links all of your daily notes. And now if you want to jump to them, you can just click these. And so what actually, like, the whole progression was just taking that, realizing, oh, I can sort of make this into a Python script that I just run daily. And so it would clear out like notes that didn't exist. So it basically just generated the same thing, but only showing like the current month and notes that did exist. And that was just like a cron job that I had running like every hour or so. Eventually, when I started to play around with Volcano and like actually wanted to sort of like battle test the API, I was like, okay, can I make a view here? Like, can I make my own custom view? And how it was really just a test of, I bet I could do this. It wasn't so much motivated by like, I really need this feature. And yet it's surprising that like the staying power has been I kind of don't know how to use Obsidian without the calendar anymore.
And I think a lot of people, clearly with 30,000 downloads or 29,800 last time I looked, that a lot of people feel the same way, and would love to kind of see your screen, see your Obsidian, how you do it. And not only is it so powerful from a functionality perspective, but it's also beautiful. And so are you a full stack developer? Do you do everything from, yeah, that's kind of what I figured.
Yeah. It's amazing. It's been very small tweaks along the way, but I'd say visually, it's like funny looking back at older mock-ups of the calendar, and I've learned the subtle differences of all of the different like major calendar apps, and obviously I'm pulling from a lot of different inspiration points, but I'm pretty happy with how it looks today.
Yeah.
Sure. Let me just do a screen share. This might sound like I'm just trying to promote the calendar plugin more, but
you don't have to promote it any more than it's already then. Everyone loves it. It's just superb. Yeah.
But my like controversial Obsidian usage is I do not use the file explorer.
I don't think that's controversial at all.
Interesting.
I think that's cool.
My philosophy with notes are everything's anchored in a daily note, and everything needs to eventually lead to a daily note because I kind of care about when I started that note. So for me, when I create a new note, it's always it always sort of starts. This is my template, just with some stuff collapsed. And basically, the main thing is my overview, just kind of like time bound everything. I'll just create new notes and just sort of, this is sort of like a branching off point. When I create a new note, I'll just prefix it with the date, and usually not the time, like the actual timestamp itself. I find that that's less important, but yeah.
So just before we dive deeper in, so this kind of philosophy is it's similar to kind of the Rome philosophy of using the daily note as the launching point for everything, and not really displaying your list of notes. You can get to it, but you have to, do some special, kind of like searching around to find your total list of notes. But if you think about it, the goal of capturing notes is to extend your thoughts. And a great way to extend your thoughts is through linking them and the serendipitous connections that you get through your various thoughts, versus when you're looking at your list of notes, then you're sort of kind of biased and predisposed, especially to the stuff you've captured recently, if or alphabetically, depending on what you're looking at, it's going to bias what you see, versus, kind of this clean slate, daily launch point view.
I also find that I get frustrated looking at the file explorer and seeing two notes that are not related next to one another. I don't know why, but I'm just like, oh wait, this, like, even just categorically, I'm like, this is a place and this is this is a time series. Then I want to organize it, but I actually don't really use folders at all for really any of my notes. Everything is a flat structure just for convenience. And
it gives you more real estate.
So. Yeah, exactly. So I'm working off of my desktop right now, but I have a really small MacBook Air, just 13-inch, and that's probably my primary note-taking space, just because I can kind of have that on my lap, just anywhere, and just kind of write up my daily journaling there. So this is like basically me trying to replicate that setup, but for the most part, some of the things that I do, like I don't use like the sliding panes plugin. Everything is just assuming I have really small screen real estate.
Yep. Cool. Okay, so you use the daily as your launching off point. You have a template here that you use to kind of, for you, how you like to work and tracking your stuff. Is your logbook where you kind of track what you did for the day? You kind of dump stuff in there?
So my logbook is, I think, unique. I use things. for so I'm on my Windows desktop here, so I can't demo it, but I use things on my laptop, and so I have there's things. I can actually just showcase it really quick. There's the things logbook plugin that I created. I created it really with me being the sole user in mind.
I need this. Wow.
But it will basically just do periodic dumps every like by default every 30 minutes. It'll just grab all of my completed tasks from things and dump them into my daily notes.
Awesome. I have to get this. I didn't even know you had this plugin. That's so cool. Yeah, so, because I have that same issue, because I use things as my task tracker, because it's built, it's beautiful and it works very well for that. But I don't have any way to link back to my journal, my daily notes, and what I did. And so I've just been duplicating, copy paste from things logbook in, and I didn't even know you had this.
Yeah, I definitely feel like it's a little hidden gem, but I love it. So I'm okay with it having just one user of being me. But what's really nice, just to hype it up a little bit more, what was nice is that it'll backfill all of your old tasks. So when I was basically doing a bunch of stress testing, I have so many things, notes dating back to 2015. So if I were to cycle through all of my notes, it generated daily notes for me dating back all the way.
Great.
Yeah. So you can even see some of my super busy days.
Cool.
Yeah, so that, I keep that collapsed, but it's basically completely owned by that plugin. And it's nice to just kind of for looking back, but for the most part, I won't really touch it. And then on this day, I think it's pretty fun. It's basically really just like a Snapchat memories kind of feature, Facebook memories. It's nice when you finally see I did have a note from 2 years on this day.
I like that. There was an app that I used a while ago. I think it was called Day One, maybe, that did something similar. And it was I really like that nice touch where it would show, oh yeah, a year ago, this is what I was working on. Cool. And it also had a beautiful UI, but it didn't do much else.
Yeah, that was really, I don't know if it's still as popular, but for a while that was the number one diary app. I remember that one. Yeah, and then goals are sort of my. I don't really do any task management in Obsidian, but I do still keep tasks in very high, or basically this is my goal for today, and I'll keep that in Obsidian still. And those sort of act as tasks.
How do you, just before you jump into calendar, just total tangent for a second.
Yeah.
So you said this is a Windows machine that you're demoing on. How do you, presuming that you work back and forth between Windows and Mac OS, how do you track your tasks? So if you're using things doesn't run in Windows, how do you manage across OSs for your task management and those sorts of things?
For task management, it's not something that hasn't quite come up as often. I'll just, for right now, I'll just literally pull it up on my phone and just type in a quick, jot in a quick note. And that's fast enough for me. And then for keeping everything in sync, I normally I use Obsidian Sync. So to rep that's keeping all my notes in sync. But for task management, it's just typing into my phone real quick.
I know. I we're talking about Obsidian, but I can't help but think about, things. And I love things. But for a while, I too was using a Mac for maybe half of my life and a PC for the other half of my life. And it was a pain because I had to use Todoist and find a way to keep Todoist and things in. And Todoist is, it's a decent app. And what I liked about it is that it's cross-platform. you can't, I mean, the Things UI is just so beautiful and so well structured and architected. Things to me is like the bear of task management, just this gorgeous app.
I will stand by, Things is just so smart. Like it's just so clear that the people creating it put so much thought, and that like every time I try and do something or like learn something new about it, I'm like, of course, that's the way it should work. That's great.
Totally great.
And I love that about Things. So that's why I found it more important to just sort of plan out a workflow where I can keep using Things, rather than, I see a lot of people kind of struggling to figure out how to replicate that behavior in Obsidian. And it's sort of like this Emacs mentality of like, well, got to kind of bolt things on. And I still love well, I already have a workflow. That's okay. Let's just figure out how I can kind of seamlessly integrate the two.
Very cool. Do you track your projects in both Things and Obsidian?
So Things, I find I don't necessarily organize things like projects. For me, it's more like useful for just associating like tasks to particular days. And then I'll kind of keep things clustered just so that it's easier to see like, oh yeah, I have like 15 like just work tasks to get done.
Got it.
But yeah, I do keep all like normal, like if it's like work related projects or even just like plugin work, I'll keep that stuff in Obsidian now.
Got it. Yeah. What I generally do is for any tasks or projects and things that I want to have more than just a single point about it. Like I want to really journal on it or expand my thoughts on it. I will include the Obsidian URL in the Things task or in the Things project so that they're synced that way, that I can get back and forth between the two that way.
I would love to, like, that's one thing I need to like sit down and figure out my workflow for that. That's something I definitely want. But I'm like, okay, I need to figure out what's sort of the linking point. Is there an easy way to sort of drop the URL in and kind of keep everything in sync? But
well, I can't wait to see what you come out with, because right now I do it manually. I copy the Obsidian URL out of Obsidian. I go into Things, I paste it in, and vice versa. So
yeah, I think it's definitely gotten easier. I think I normally don't really use the Obsidian like URLs too often, but yeah, I'll need to figure out the easiest way, especially if there's a way to like link to a specific block or something. That'd be great.
That is a good question. I'm not sure about that. At least I link to a specific note, but I haven't tried beyond that. But I can't wait to see what you play around with. So, okay. Yeah. Anyway, to the calendar. So that's cool. I'm so glad to hear about the Things integration. As soon as we finish this discussion, I'm going to start playing with it. I'm so excited for that. Okay. So when you're in your daily note, and I want to stick with your process a little bit. And then, by the way, we're going to get into Liam showing not only the calendar, but also kind of how he builds plugins. And I think we're going to take a little behind the scenes look at his development environment, which would be cool. So when you are taking notes here for, like when you're writing your goals out for the day or whatever, you'll put links to other notes, blank links that you'll then expand into. Is that kind of your flow, your launching point?
Yeah. So for me, it's really like a goal that would be nice. I think I have it on another task, but like, for example, I'm planning out so this is a sneak peek for the calendar plugin, but a new feature that I would love to sort of build out is have a note. So working on drag and drop for the calendar plugin. So one feature that doesn't quite exist yet, but I really want to, is to be able to just drag a note and drop in a link to that specific daily note.
That'd be cool.
My workflow is just, okay, I know today I want to work on this. And I'll keep it as a task so that I can just, the task doesn't even need to mean that I finished it, just needs to sort of reflect that I was working on this. And then I kind of plan out. So this is sort of a work in progress, not only for filling out like the project goals, but I, until like the past week, never used tags. I was just sort of a firm believer that if you need a tag, you're wrong. You actually just need a link. But yep. I've sort of started to get really excited about the like Dataview plugin. I'm not sure if you've sort of seen that to date, but the Dataview plugin I'm really excited about it. It doesn't have a settings pane, but a little hard to read with the contrast, but you can basically just do like SQL queries of your own data, and it'll use the metadata from the notes themselves. And that's where I was sort of like trying to introduce tags into my workflow a little bit, so that I'm hoping that that could potentially power like a Kanban style view for
That'd
tasks.
That'd be great. Yep.
And so to kind of give actually, so this was my sort of attempt at using like a dashboard. So filling this out a bit more, you can kind of, it'll actually find, this is just anything with the loose ends tag, which I use to just sort of, if I'm filling out a note and I realize, oh, I need to put more in here later, but I definitely don't want to finish this yet. And so that's sort of helping me kind of figure out.
That's really cool. Yep.
So
I think that's a good use of tags. So I tend to subscribe to your kind of philosophy. I'm not a big tag user, but where I think tags do make sense is for state tracking types of things, like loose ends, like idea, like quote, if you will, that type of a thing. But links from most everything else for me.
Yeah, I am just starting to come around to that there is a place for both of them, especially now with nested tags in Obsidian. I feel like I can kind of get around it. Like it makes a little bit more sense to me to see it for like, okay, these are my active projects. These are like tasks to do. So I'm still figuring out my workflow around that, but my general like sort of approach is just, okay, fill out this note, link it to any related topics as I go. But yeah, what is nice is now, because I always anchor everything in daily notes, I can immediately see all of the like times that I've wanted to either work on this project, or like when I the sort of ideation of this feature, it's immediately traceable through the linked mentions.
Yeah, and it's nice because then you don't have to, within the project itself, timestamp every one of the, put a date in every time you're working on something, saying, okay, this is what I worked on this date. You already have that captured by using the date as the launch off point. Yeah,
exactly. I don't want to like bog down my workflow by adding more workflow.
Yep.
So as much as I can like use, stick to a single philosophy, it helps a lot.
Cool. What theme are you using, by the way?
Just to quickly rep my new theme. So this past weekend, I was like, all right, I'm going to reorganize my notes. And my approach to reorganizing my notes is, well, I should flesh out my own theme. So this theme, if I pull up, is my own theme that I named Stormcloak, which is based off of the Nord theme, a slight pun from the video game Skyrim, if you're familiar with the Stormcloaks. But yeah, so it's basically it's the same color scheme used by the Nord theme. So like the 16 color palette of Nord theme. And then I just kind of added my own sort of flavor and flair on top of it. But I think it makes I've noticed that a lot of other themes will either make the calendar really flashy or really muted. And I really want something in the middle. So I figured I'd need to build my own there.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so that's sort of my basic approach. So what's nice is then if I just jump into sort of the calendar plugin note itself, linked to Obsidian, but you can kind of see there's a lot of linked mentions here, and a lot of different resourcing, a lot of sort of different changelogs. And this was my other. I don't know if this is going to render correctly because I just haven't figured out the SQL queries for this, but I like trying to integrate like a dashboard with the Dataview thing here.
Yep. Cool.
Yeah.
All right. So calendar plugin. You started with Volcano, then the API comes out, and walk us through that. And what do you develop in?
Yeah, so I use Visual Studio Code for the as sort of my setting up my environment, or like as my tool chain. And then one thing that's sort of notable, I will credit where credit is due. But so Jamie Brines, if I'm pronouncing his name correctly, he I give full credit to introducing Obsidian to Svelte. Svelte is a really awesome JavaScript framework that is sort of perfect for Obsidian plugins. And I kind of he used it for the Todoist plugin. And I think that was sort of the jumping off point for a lot of other plugin developers to sort of follow suit. It makes building out sort of custom views really straightforward. And it's a really just lightweight UI framework. So it's really simple for to get started, and it's very fast. So that's what the calendar plugin is written in today. So the first thing I will say is a lot of people, at least on forums, seem to have this notion, since a lot of the really popular plugins use Svelte, that you need to use Svelte. I will say that's not the case, but there is a lot of good benefits that you get from using Svelte. And maybe just worth sort of pulling up. So svelte.dev.
We only see your Obsidian screen. So if you want to share some others,
sure,
that'd be cool. Those look similar.
Once you like a color scheme, make every app you have look exactly the same. That's the goal. Yeah, so this is the sort of core Svelte component from Visual Studio, just from the Visual Studio Code view. And this is sort of a basic rundown of how Svelte works. So Svelte, what's nice is this is a single file that has sort of three sections. It has this script tag, which is all of the JavaScript that's sort of powering the calendar. And then there's this div tag. So this is all of the HTML markup for actually building out the table of weeks and days. And then here's the sort of styles, at least the some of the styles that are making the UI look the way it does. And so that's just a structure set up by Svelte.
Is TypeScript a requirement?
TypeScript is not a requirement for plugins. It is you should probably use TypeScript, especially if you have a more complicated app. The reason being that all of the bindings in the API are written with TypeScript. So if I were to pull up the API, which is going to require me to figure out Zoom and how to share multiple screens, which isn't gonna go so well. But the Obsidian API is all sort of defined and spec'd out using TypeScript.
Gotcha.
So you, when you use something like Visual Studio Code or another IDE, it's going to give you a lot of type hinting and sort of help you out along the way. And so that's definitely a good reason. The other reason is that it'll point out, so TypeScript helps and points out a lot of the like common errors and pitfalls that you might run into. So it's definitely not a requirement, but I would definitely recommend it, especially if you're just starting out. It'll help you sort of get your bearings. Yes, so just diving a little bit deeper into the calendar UI itself. So one thing that I think is worth pointing out. So this is the calendar UI package. This is a separate package that's split off from the calendar plugin itself. That means that if other plugin authors want to create a plugin of their own with a calendar interface, you should be able to very easily integrate a calendar like UI into your plugin just by using this package. And it's available via NPM. And there's we can share links later for how to actually install it. But
we'll put all those in the show notes.
Yeah. So what that means is that you get the same exact look and feel as the calendar plugin, and you can kind of have it behave exactly how you want. And so,
and thank you for making that. What was the impetus behind? Was it originally a separate module like this, or did you break it out? And
yes, so this was actually not an easy task. The original calendar plugin was not written to be sort of as modular as it is today. But I'd say that just sort of the veracity in which like Ryan Murphy, another moderator, really wanted a calendar UI in his plugin, and he was very adamant about it, and that sort of wore me down until I split it into its own module.
Yeah.
There's actually one other package. So I would say that the calendar plugin today is really sort of three different entities. There's the like plugin, which is really just adding the commands and hooking it up to the daily notes. And there's also another package, which is the Obsidian Daily Notes interface, which is basically another package that plugins can use to integrate with daily notes, weekly notes, and now monthly notes.
Yeah.
And so you can create them, you can find them in your vault, and it'll basically also hook it up with templates. So if you want to just make sure that all of your users are using the same templates as the daily notes plugin or the new periodic notes plugin, they'll all sort of work together. And so that's the other sort of component of the calendar plugin. So it's really just taking the daily notes interface and hooking it up to the calendar UI. And that's really all what the actual plugin does.
And it does quite a bit. And that also makes it so easy to create kind of weekly summaries and weekly goals and monthly summaries and monthly goals and those sorts of things as well.
Yeah, exactly. The monthly notes currently, so I can just quickly, let's see how quick I can do it. Yeah, if I just very quickly jump back over to my notes.
Visual Studio runs on a Mac.
What?
You can run VS Code on a Mac, You don't have to use a Windows machine. I'm joking. If it wasn't so difficult to set up a Hackintosh, that's what this would be. Yeah, so if I were to just jump quickly into the calendar plugin, obviously another sort of core feature is showing your weekly notes. And so there's this show week number, which will then add another column to the calendar. So clicking on the week number
will create a weekly note or open a weekly note. And that functionality is entirely powered by that daily notes interface. So what's nice is it keeps all of that logic in one spot, but also other plugins like the review plugin and Slated can sort of also be sort of powered by that same core interface.
This is amazing work that you've done pulling all of this together for all of us Obsidian users. It's how much of what you do is scratching your own itches versus kind of looking at what people are saying in the community and responding to requests that are coming through?
That's a great question. I would say people have pretty good intuitions in the community as to like what's a good addition. And I would say, actually, if I were to hop into sort of the final aspect of the plugin, let me just do a quick share of. So the other aspect of managing and creating a plugin is maintaining it. And if I were to click into the calendar plugin,
you even have your own GitHub color scheme.
No, it's just remarkably similar, the default dark theme, but yeah, 93 closed issues.
Yeah, you are quite active there at monitoring and staying on top of that. That's cool.
So there are a lot of users have some just really good intuition as to like what could be a good extension of the calendar, and a lot of them have sort of changed my thoughts about what would be a useful core calendar plugin. Some of which obviously are sort of outside the scope, but a lot of them like boil down to really just useful features that I like. When I think about it, I'm like, okay, yeah, I could use that. That sounds good. I like that. And there are some feature requests that obviously come in, and I'm like, yeah, I was already thinking about something similar. Yeah, that sounds good. And then as soon as it sort of reaches critical mass of a bunch of people kind of being like, yeah, I think this is worth it, then that's when I sort of end up jumping right on that feature. But I think that what I'm pretty proud of has been that like months into the calendar plugin that it hasn't turned into this abomination, which has been as often sort of my fear. Yeah. So I'm pretty proud that 100 issues in, that it's not like 100 different switches in the settings pane of different configuration. I've actually like tried to keep that as lean as possible. So I think for as sort of complicated as it is, I'm pretty proud of how simple it looks.
It's awesome. Okay, so show us what plugins you do have, because I just became aware today of the Things plugin. So what else have you done for Obsidian that we should be aware of?
Sure. So I can actually just hop back into. So these are not all my plugins, but these are either plugins I've contributed to or just packages that I have that could be potential plugins just in my workspace. A lot of them are sort of calendar centric now, but I have the Things Logbook plugin, which is published. There's a Kanban plugin on the way, which is something I've been experimenting with for the past week or so.
Can't wait to see that, because I enjoy that type of a workflow.
It's interesting. It's a fun project to think about how it fits not only into like my workflow, but also just how a Kanban can work in an ecosystem that is all markdown notes.
Right.
And it's obviously simple to think about like, okay, I can just dump everything into like a database, or like, how does this work here? But it's also like, how do you make the interface like purely supplemental to your notes rather than kind of sort of forcing you into a specific paradigm. So there's a lot of work there to sort of think about.
Yeah, and in particular, if we're going to be moving to a WYSIWYG kind of an editor, what would have to change, if we're moving off of Prosemirror or CodeMirror. So
yeah, I mean, I still think obviously the two modes of edit and preview will still sort of exist in their current form, even with WYSIWYG. So it won't completely stomp a lot of plugins, but yeah, that is definitely something to sort of think about how those two interact. But I have high hopes.
mm-hmm.
And then another plugin that I used for a little bit is sort of this code marker plugin, which basically allowed you to, if you're familiar with like Vim code markers, basically just annotate with comments like fold here, fold here, fold here, so that new notes can automatically be folded. Right now, so I actually had planned on releasing that, and a day later, persistent folding was introduced to the core. So I don't know if I just need to dump this in the trash, but it is still, I'm still figuring out how to validate its existence.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so a lot of it is just things that either augment my workflow, yep, or I definitely don't want to be in a situation where I'm supporting a plugin that I personally don't find extremely valuable.
Sure.
And that's sort of where I sort of figure out what things to work on. And that's why I try and stay sort of extremely focused in this sort of like journaling and note-taking like department, because those are the things I know. And I want to like sort of do justice to
I
those.
appreciate that. What are note streak and periodic notes?
So periodic notes is another new plugin that I released recently that is essentially a combined plugin of daily notes, weekly notes, and monthly notes. And so if I very quickly just hop back over to Obsidian. So if I go to it, really all you kind of see, so I have daily notes enabled, but there's also monthly notes and weekly notes, same exact format and structure as the default daily notes. There are some little gems, one of which you probably won't be able to see, but it will automatically migrate your settings from the daily notes plugin and the weekly notes plugin when you install it. And then it kind of tries to just do some very basic validation so that like you can't insert any illegal formats, and it makes sure that like your folders exist, because those were just some of the most common like pain points with integrating with the calendar plugin, where people just either inputting like the incorrect like template or like an illegal format. So it was to make my life a little bit easier, but also to kind of give a very consolidated view. And then it also has like an easy expansion point if I wanted to introduce yearly notes or quarterly notes or milestone notes.
Yep.
And then the note streak plugin it's still something that might be a real plugin in the future. But for right now, it's just an experiment of, can another plugin tap into the calendar plugin? And that's sort of still one of my kind of goals with these plugins, is to not only when I work on one thing, think about how it interacts with Obsidian, but how they can kind of build an ecosystem with the other existing plugins. And so with specifically like the calendar, obviously there's a lot of requests. Can I show Outlook events, or can I show all of these other integration points?
Yep.
And I definitely don't want to be in the market of like maintaining all of those integrations, but I want to provide a way or an interface where other people can just hook into that and say, okay, here's a very basic interface for that.
Yeah.
And so the Note Streak plugin basically does that. And what it does is it just adds like a CSS class to each note that progressively like gets more green based off of how many notes in a continuous streak you've completed.
Got it.
And the idea is it's an entirely separate plugin that can kind of hook in other metadata into the calendar plugin. And I never made it look that great, so it's not really worth sort of hyping up. But it was a good proof of concept, and I think there are other people interested in eventually adding Google Calendar integrations or other calendar integrations into.
Yeah, I was thinking about Things. I know Things integrates into the iCloud calendar to pull up your events for the day.
Yeah, so there's that aspect of it. That I think is almost like I want something at the top of my daily note, you know? Like I don't necessarily know if I care about seeing that in the calendar view.
Right.
Like at the top of the note, that would be nice.
Yep, I totally agree.
Or I really like, so a huge inspiration, if you were to pull up a side-by-side of the calendar plugin and Fantastical, you'll notice a lot of similarities that are not unnoticed, as Fantastical is another just really beautiful piece of software. And a lot of the UI sort of aspects, but also just functional aspects of it were inspired by that. But one thing they do, which is really nice, is that just on hover, you can kind of see a really like nice overview of your tasks and your events. And that's some other enhancement I've been thinking about.
Cool.
Yeah.
That's awesome. This has been so great, all that you're doing. A couple quick questions for you. One, what would you recommend? What's a good place for people to start who want to, so you mentioned Svelte, you mentioned TypeScript, but where would you go? Where do you get the API? So, all right, you have someone who, I love what Liam's doing. I'd like to try and build my own something. Where would you recommend they get started?
Yeah, so let's see if I can pull up a couple things. So one, like the very first resource that you have is, so if I were to pull up just the Obsidian API, the Obsidian API as it stands today is really just a singular TypeScript file that has all of the like definitions of the types, and it's very comprehensive. But if you are very unfamiliar with the architecture, it's probably going to be pretty overwhelming. You're going to see the sort of most like top level point is this app, which is just the entire Obsidian app. And this, so there's basically there's a single instance of this app class that lives on the global object in Obsidian. And what that means is you have all of these properties of it, and it kind of goes on and on. But what that means, and I think what's more useful to get like a hands-on feel for how to build a plugin, is that since Obsidian is an Electron app, it means that you can always open the dev tools for Obsidian. And I'm going to be getting a bunch of errors because I have an illegal file name in my sync. But if I go to the console in my DevTools, so I opened up the DevTools just by pressing Control-Shift-I in Obsidian, I can actually just type in app and then expand this object. And this is both the officially supported properties of Obsidian that will map to things inside the API, and all of the internals. So some things are not exposed for a couple of reasons. Either they're expected to change in the future, the developers are just not like planning on cementing that in the API, or there's sort of no plan to actually expose it in the API, and it's sort of meant to be an internal only sort of feature. That's sort of, so there is sort of a use at your own discretion if there's something not in the API, but it gives you a very good overview of seeing, okay, where do the plugins live? Okay, the plugins live here. So these are all of my, like all my installed plugins. And what does a plugin actually look like? And so I can expand that, and I can see, okay, it has all of this is where events are stored, and this is how it has it has a link to the app, and it has a link to the manifest. And you get a much better sort of picture of just sort of how Obsidian works by kind of paring down from this. And so this was the only sort of way to interface with the API pre it being exposed, and when back in the Volcano days. So I feel pretty comfortable just sort of digging through this, but it gives you just a nice overview of, okay, this is how the app exists and lives today, and it gives you a good mindset to try and follow. So I think that's a nice way to sort of like just learn more about how the app works in general.
Thank you for diving into that. All right, last question for you, Liam. We've kept you much longer than we promised. Is this: you've created all these plugins, you're doing a lot for the community. For people who want to kind of support your initiatives, how can people do that? Where can they kind of contribute to what you're doing and give a thank you to what you're doing?
Yeah. So I have a Buy Me a Coffee. So you can go to buymeacoffee.com/Liam Cain if you're interested in donating. And that definitely sort of helps out, just sort of helps fuel my ideas and some of my plugins. But otherwise, just another way to help out is just getting sort of involved, sort of either using the plugins, using similar plugins, coming up with ideas and creating issues or anything that you'd like to see. Because I think one thing that's really powerful about Obsidian today is its community, and so I think that's one thing that's really important to keep building on. So
true. You want to stop sharing?
Yeah, let me stop sharing. But yeah, I completely agree with you. The community is exceptional. Everyone that we've spoken to all feels that I've been fortunate enough to have on the program has said how wonderful the community is. That's what drew me in. And I also appreciate how everyone wants to serve, to help other people, which is it's so warm, it's so welcoming. And so not only do I appreciate all the plugins you've built, I can't wait to jump into the Things plugin as soon as we finish, but I also appreciate how active you are in the plugin community elsewhere in Discord, kind of helping others, and not only receptive to quirk requests people are making about the calendar, but just how much you contribute back. And so thank you for all that you do, Liam, not just for what you're making, but how you're helping others. Thank you for the time you spent with us today. We really appreciate it. Yeah. Thanks for having me and giving me the opportunity to talk about software that I love to talk about and work on. So yeah, I don't mind being as active as I am, and I think it's definitely all well deserved. So yeah,
we love it. Thank you.